Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Aldo, how are you?
Yes. How are you, Gerard? Very nice to see you.
Hi.
Very nice to see
Hello,
you.
Kamasa. Very nice to see you too.
Hi, Kamasa.
Hi.
Hello, you're there. Can you hear us, Kamasa?
Yeah, I'm here.
Very good. Okay. So, Aldo, is there a possibility for you to maybe put a light in front of you? Because we.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to. Yeah. I'm going to turn on another light.
Okay, great. So, Kamasa, where are you now?
I'm good. How? I didn't hear you.
Where are you? Are you in Akka or in?
No, I'm in the northern parts of Ghana.
All right. Okay. Well, that's very exciting. And Aldo, whereabout are you right now?
I'm in London, but I'm traveling tomorrow to Lima.
Right on. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Are you in Australia?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay.
So I just had dinner. Yes.
Yeah. I imagine it's very
Wow.
It's a little topsy-turvy, but it's okay. It's okay. We're expecting 43 degrees Celsius tomorrow here in Melbourne.
Wow.
That is just not good.
No.
It's just not good.
No. That's horrible. Yeah.
So
do we need to be on, with the camera on all the time for the webinar, or we will be on
I
and
would
off
say
depending on? Yeah. Okay.
I think what happens is that the person who is speaking is, I think that lights up. And for the rest, I think we should all just continue to be, with the camera on. And if you want, you can mute your mic if you.
Yeah.
I don't hear any weird background noises. So I think Kamasa is will probably come on again. And I think we're working hard to get Bernice.
Good.
And if worse comes to worse, it's just you and I, Aldo.
Okay. I watched the Luxembourg panel about this issue, and it was very interesting to hear from different perspectives, from the Green Climate Fund and Rabobank and Total, right? And local organization, all their perspectives. Quite interesting. Yeah.
And what I like about our digital summit now is that we have 3 people who are in the field. So in Luxembourg, in a way, it was sort of the ideal chain of actors that should be working together, that can link up from people who are working in the field on the ground, doing the building the local infrastructure, to the aggregators, to the international investment community. But here we will really be talking about what are some of the local barriers, and I'm very interested to hear about your impact bonds. So that should be really good.
Great.
All right, it's time, and I think we're still working to get Bernice from Kenya and to get Kamasa back from Ghana. She was just online. In the meantime, we have about 50 plus people registered, which is wonderful, which is absolutely wonderful, because we organized this on a very short notice. And I will just wait perhaps 1 minute or so to see whether we can get Bernice and Kamasa to come online as well. It was wonderful to see all these people connected. And let's just wait 1 minute for. Okay. So Tanya of the Global Landscape Forum said, "Let's go." So let's give it a start. So thank you very much, everybody, all people who have registered. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And on behalf of CGIAR's Program on Forestries and Agroforestry, C4 and Tropenbos International, I would like to welcome you to this digital summit. This digital summit is organized to build on the e-dialogue, which was started to solicit comments on the literature review, which was written by the consortium partners. So we've asked 3 active participants of the e-dialogue to come into this digital summit and to provide some more detail, because some very interesting things were said and barriers were identified that were not caught in that literature review, and we would like to include those. So this is a great opportunity to dive into a bit more detail. Now, the e-dialogue itself was also part of a bigger series of events, and the goal of that series of events was to rethink the question on how we can scale up inclusive finance in sustainable landscapes. So there was a series of interviews which was conducted by Tropenbos. You can find those interviews on the website of Tropenbos and FTA. We also had an earlier digital summit where we heard from an investment manager, a representative of the Forest Governance and Economics Group of the Food and Agriculture Organization, and an Ugandan non-profit organization who works on the ground to build business cases there with partners. And then finally, we also had a great panel at the Global Landscape Forum, the investment case, a few weeks ago in Luxembourg. So what we really are going to do today is to go into more detail of some of the barriers and some of the solutions that have been identified by the three panelists. And again, we only have one present at the moment, but I'm sure people are working very hard to get the other two online as well, who are Bernice from Kenya and Kamasa from Ghana. But I would like to introduce you, Aldo. Aldo, perhaps you can tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, the organization you work for, and we'll take it from there.
Yes, thank you, Gerard, and good morning to everyone. Yes, well, I work for the Rainforest Foundation UK, which is an NGO based in London. We work with forest people in the Congo and in the Amazon basins. Our business model is working with local organizations, local NGOs. In the case of the Amazon, we work mostly with indigenous people's representative organizations. So we really work very, very closely with the people on the ground. We have part of our work is around campaigning on certain issues, and other part of our work is supporting local communities to map their lands, secure their land rights, and also to improve their livelihoods. And that's what we've been doing in Peru for the last years. We've been working with Ashaninkas communities in the central part of Peru, to support their creation of their own producer association, and building their capacities in order to they can basically produce and export their own products. My experience, my background is in ecology actually and conservation, but my experience is for the last, I would say, 15 years working in the Amazon with local communities, indigenous peoples, on issues related with extractive industries and land rights, also to issues related with production and cooperatives, and lastly, during the last years, related with social finance. I think we can hear you, Gerard. Probably you're mute.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you hear me now? Yes? Okay, very good. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I don't think I touched anything. So tell me a little bit about your organization. How many people work for your organization? And you know, I used to be a banker. I have to admit, I used to be a banker. So one of the things that I like to think about is, you know, how do we finance things, and where does the money come from, and how is the money spent? So just as a, you know, and I don't mean to be rude, but you know, how many people work for your organization, and perhaps you can also tell me about, you know, how you are funded, and where does that funding come from?
Yes, we're a small organization, less than 30 people. Varies depending on projects. I would say the average would be 23, 25 people. And most of the funds come from other foundations, and from governmental aid funds, like DFID in the UK, for example, GIZ, USAID, and you know, different donors. Yes.
We have Kamasa online from Ghana. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Very good. So this is all coming together now. This is very nice. We just started. We just had a introduction by Aldo, and perhaps I'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and also the organization that you set up in Ghana to work with rural women. Can you hear me? Hi, Kamasa, can you hear me? I'm afraid that perhaps the connection is not as good as we had hoped. Yep, and unfortunately, Kamasa is, well, I guess that is, one of the risks of inviting people from all over the world who are working in the field. So let's go back to you, Aldo. So where we left it off is your money comes from some of the major donors, basically. So that means that you also have to have, connection with the donors, etc., and build relationships with them.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Now, one of the things that you mentioned in the e-dialogue is the use of impact bonds and how they can be used to basically attract funding, external funding, to support the local initiatives that you're working on in the Amazon. And perhaps, can you explain to us what an impact bond is, a development impact bond, and how have you used it to mobilize funding?
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we have Kamasa again. Kamasa, can you hear us this time? Hi there. Kamasa, can you hear us? We can see you. All right. If Kamasa, feel free at any time.
Okay.
Oh, here you are. Okay.
All right.
Can you hear us?
Okay.
Very good. Can you introduce
yes,
yourself?
I can hear you.
Excellent. It's all coming together.
I can hear you.
You can or you cannot?
I can hear you very well.
Okay. Can you introduce yourself and your organization, please?
Okay, I'm Kamasa Dorothy from Ghana.
Excellent. Well, I think the connection is still a little bit bad. So perhaps, Aldo, we're improvising now. Can you perhaps continue to discuss the impact bonds, please?
Yes. Okay. So impact bonds basically are not bonds. So the name is really confusing. There are result-based projects or models where an outcome payer or a funder pays for results, and impact investor put the money in advance, so local organizations like NGOs can implement a certain solution to address a certain problem. And the outcome payers pay only if those outcomes are achieved, which are independently verified by a third party, and they pay according to the level of achievement to the investor. The investor usually, because he's putting its money at risk, is expecting a financial return. Of course, they are interested. They are impact investors. They are interested in an impact, but they also expect a financial return, which is associated with the risk and the cost of capital. So basically, this model was developed in the UK to address the social sector, because it gives because the public sector is difficult for the public sector to innovate. This model allows the actors really to come to agreements easily, to build partnerships, and to tie all the funds to the results. So it gives more room to the implementers to innovate, to focus on really on the outcomes, not necessarily on how to achieve the outcomes, which are usual, a normal project under a grant, for example, is more focused on. So it's an interesting model, very innovative. Has been implemented in the UK for the last 8 years. There's still a lot of discussions around it, if it's really works or how successful it is. But certainly there are some things that do work, which is basically these partnerships that are built around a certain social challenge that needs to be addressed, and how all parties come and work together. Also, how everything is more oriented to results, to the outcomes. So at the end, you have everyone is trying to work in a more efficient way to achieve those outcomes, instead of diverging to other things. So what we think is that we can use that model and implement it also in agriculture. And agriculture, and we have tested it in Peru in a small pilot. This was tested in 2015 in Alshanica communities in Peru, in a small producer association called Quemito N. And we saw how a project that was implemented there using this specific model, how the local actors were working towards the outcomes, to thinking about that you need to achieve the outcomes, but also you have a responsibility because the outcome payer needs to pay back to the investor. So you have the investor involved, and that also gives you on one side, it gives you also insights and knowledge from the investor side, but also it gives you some more responsibility to achieve and to use better actually the funds to achieve the expected outcomes. What we think is that this could be scaled up because it's a model that can blend philanthropic money, funds with impact investing, and I think in the case of smallholders in the Amazon, for example, and particularly with indigenous peoples, we need a different kind of finance. The classic finance, classic loans, they really don't work. They are very limited. The interests are very high. Usually these producers are, when they are aggregated, when they are organized and they form their own cooperatives and associations, it's very difficult for them to access to that kind of finance. So we need a different kind of finance. We need different kind of instruments. And I think impact bonds will be an interest way to an interest model to approach those barriers. Certainly, if we want to scale the impact bond model, we need public funds because they are the one who really, I mean, the governments are really the ones who really can scale this up. And governments now are investing in agriculture, in smallholders, with very, very low success rate. I would say the impact really is very low because basically the results are not measured properly. And one of the positive things of the impact bond model is that results are verified, and payments are only disbursed when those outcomes are achieved. So governments are investing in smallholders, but the impact is quite low now. There is a lack of private investment also because the investors find it's very risky invest in this kind of context and in this kind of geographies. So what we think is that by bringing those worlds together in this model, in this kind of impact bond, development impact bond model, I think it could we could think it could really help finance to reach those kind of farmers.
So that is now just to bring it a bit more alive. We can perhaps think of an example of how the impact bond work. And the few examples that I know in the Netherlands, for example, it was pioneered by the city of Rotterdam. They were very concerned about youth unemployment. So they made an agreement. They had an organization that received money from an investor, an impact investor, and they basically said, if you make sure that there are a certain amount of people who will get employment, then the government pays you, right? So it was very easy to measure because it was either you're employed or you're unemployed. Hello, Kamasa is back. And Kamasa, sorry, Kamasa, feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, from Ghana. My relation is to Ghana. We are into food security research, and advocacy. We provide technical and social support to rural women in the agricultural value chain. Basically, what we are doing is leveraging.
Okay, I think we've unfortunately lost Kamasa again. In the meantime, unless she's back. No. Okay. So can you make it a bit more live, to us about an impact bond in your Peruvian Amazon context? So who provided the money? For example, who was the impact investor? What were the criteria based upon which the result-based payment was paid out, and who was actually paying out? So there was an organization, I presume that was you, who was working with the local farms to create a certain impact. The impact was measured. Somebody paid for the results, but then somebody else pre-financed that. So there was an impact investor and the government. So who exactly did what? And I have a question from one of the listeners here of the Digital Summit. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, in this small pilot that we did in 2015, the outcome payer or the funder was the Common Fund for Commodities, which is an organization based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. They support local cooperatives, and they now are investing also in impact funds. The impact investor was the Schmidt Family Foundation, based in the US, in California. We implemented the project with local organizations in the ground. So the Schmidt Family Foundation provides pre-finance the activities. We implemented activities with the local organizations. And
sorry to interrupt you. How did you find these people? Who found them? Did you just pick up the phone and say, "Hey"?
No, that would be ideal, but no. the Common Fund for Commodities, actually, they were promoting impact bonds at that time, and they still are, actually. So they were the interested party, really. And then we contacted, and we found the Smith Family Foundation, who were willing to also to experiment, because this was really an experiment. That's why we really did it with a really small amount of capital. It was around $100,000, $110,000, only in a year, which is very short time to implement this kind of projects. And the results were interesting. We didn't achieve all the targets, which was also interested to learn and to know what happened, what went wrong. Certainly for the investor, was also not was ideal, but was also on their interest to learn how to improve the model, how they can improve also their investment strategy. And for the CFC, I think they proved that the model worked. They really paid only for what was successful.
Okay.
So what we have done is use that experience and that learning to design and structure an impact bond, which also includes other aspects that we haven't included at that point, which is more the environmental aspects. And particularly in forest landscapes, like the Amazon in Peru, this is certainly a core aspect. So what we're proposing now is that the outcome payer, which in this case we still are looking for an outcome payer, but the model in theory is that an outcome payer that could be governmental, the governmental agency, or a multilateral bank, or foundation, would pay for improvements in agriculture measured by productivity, but also pay for farms becoming more resilient by adopting agroforestry systems. We're talking about here about cocoa producers. So cocoa producers that currently are their production model is sustainable in terms of they are not deforesting, but their farms are purely cocoa. So with cocoa trees. So the idea is to transform that kind of production model to a more sustainable one, and also to diversify it and to make it more resilient to climate change. So with a specific agroforestry system, or different kind of actually agroforestry designs, we can improve really the resilience to climate change. So that would be another metric, the adoption of agroforestry systems by producers. And another metric is related with what I said, with also the environmental dimension, in terms of reducing the level of deforestation in the landscape, measuring by each of the communities we're working with. So the outcome payer will pay for those outcomes, based on those metrics. If the farmers improve their productivity, which is a proxy for improving incomes, the investor will be paid back by the outcome payer. If the farmers adopt agroforestry systems, and if the farmers and the communities itself, they reduce the deforestation in their community land, the investor will be paid back by the outcome payer. We have one more metric, which I think is key and is related, and we have included as an extra payment. Excuse me, and is related with the profitability of the cooperative, because what we think is that the cooperative finally tie all those aspects, and I will bring sustainability in the long term for the whole initiative. So if the cooperative can show that is profitable, there will be also an incentive for that, and the investor will receive also an extra, payment for that.
Great. All right. So one of the questions that we received here, and the questions are now coming in quickly, is so you had a pilot in 2015 that lasted for 1 or 2 years, or maybe up to now, and now you're okay, and now you want to scale it up. Is that right? And so you're looking for an outcome payer. How much money are we talking about?
In this case, for this specific project, we're talking about for outcome payments around $1.5 million
Right.
for a bit more than 3 years.
Right. Okay. So there's a question here, and the question is, if the payments are disbursed on a results-based approach, the initial investment is then on the smallholders, and what is the drawback of this? But the initial investment comes from a foundation in this case, right? Can you explain that again a bit?
You mean for the pilot?
Right. Yes. So in an impact bond, the initial investment comes from.
The initial investment came from, in this case, the Common Fund for the foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation. Yes,
right.
They pre-finance the activities.
Right. So that's, I think, very important. So that it's not the smallholders who have to mobilize the money. It is an external party that mobilizes the money, and the smallholders make interventions. And if the interventions are successful, then somebody else, in this case the Common Fund for Commodities, will pay for those interventions. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. We're talking here about smallholders and a cooperative that is not yet able to access commercial finance. Even it's difficult for them to access finance from the social lenders, from the root capitals and oiko credits. So we're talking about businesses which are at early stage, but with the right finance and support, they can really make a difference. They can improve their livelihoods, they can reduce deforestation, they can protect the forests.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay. So now we're talking about 1.5 million, and you're looking for those for funders for this particular. And how successful are you? How do you talk to these people? Where do you find them? Do you have people in your head office in London?
Yeah, basically we are contacting different funders, and it's not easy, definitely, because it's definitely a new model. That's one thing. The other thing is that usually what we have found is that people interested in pay for outcomes are organizations that have an interest even or in try the model, in test the model, or organization that have an interest in the beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. Which in this case is the Ashanica population in this region of Peru. So it's more likely that a local government or a national government is more interested to pay for those outcomes than foundation which has no link, no history with this geography or with these people. So it's difficult to find definitely a funder.
So I have a question here from Ghana, and the question is, so what if environmentalists would save 10% of their income to fund their individual small-scale restoration actions like tree planting in their localities? Now, I'm taking the liberty to interpret that question, to extend it to perhaps discuss the possibility of crowdfunding. Would it be possible, let's say, to put this question, this impact bond, to fund the impact bond through a crowdfunding action? So rather than having one big donor, you have, let's say, 200 donors?
I think so. Yes, definitely. I think it's possible. Either you could have a crowdfunding either for funding the outcomes and also for investing in the outcomes, actually.
Exactly. Yes.
And that was some idea we discussed a couple of years ago, to have several investors from a crowdfunding platform that could be investing. And it's like, for example, Kiva, they really don't charge any interest to the farmers, which is really the kind of finance we need for this kind of landscapes, right? So through a crowdfunding platform, sometimes the people that invest there, they are not really looking for a huge return. So definitely will be below market return or even zero. If they have their capital back, they could be very happy and they have great, make a great contribution.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are basically a part of a chain in financing, linking international donors with local initiatives. That is, and we need much more of that. In the beginning of our discussion, you also talked about that the local banks, they don't really finance the co-ops, etc. That there's barriers. I'd like to zoom in on that a little bit as well. Can you tell me a little bit what the local financial infrastructure is in the areas that you work? Are there local banks? Are there microfinance institutions? What is happening right there? And one of the barriers that we've identified, of course, is that there's always there's generally a lack of capacity, financial literacy, etc., but also a lack of aggregation. So you need aggregators, you need an organization, and I think that's where the co-op perhaps comes in. Just can you describe a little bit what the landscape looks like, in terms of local financial infrastructure and where you're operating?
Yes. There are definitely local banks, and in Peru, microfinance institutions and local banks have grown very rapidly in the last years, and they have a good coverage in urban areas. But in rural areas, it's more difficult, really, and the costs are quite high. And we're not talking here about rural areas well connected. The Amazon, and it's in Peru, we're talking about areas where are very isolated, that you have to basically move by boat to reach these communities. So no local bank will go there. There is also a national Agrobanco in Peru, but both local banks and Agrobanco, the interests are very high. We're talking about between 18 and 25%, which is impossible really for a smallholder. Even the social lenders, which they operate with many cooperatives, coffee cooperatives and cocoa cooperatives in Peru, like with Capital, for example, or the Rabobank Foundation, their interest rates could be between 8 and 15% or 13%, which it's really the lowest that you can get, but still high for some cooperatives and some smallholders. So I think what definitely we want to channel finance to those kind of landscapes, we need to work with some of those institutions that have the infrastructure and the capacity to reach, but also I think something key is that we could also use the cooperatives as the agents to reach the smallholders. And I think that the cooperatives have been a little bit left behind in all of these, and they have the legitimacy of a local grassroots organization. They provide services to the farmers. They understand the local context, and they have a history in the landscape. And I mean, there are many cooperatives that are doing very, very well in Peru. Even some impact funds are investing in cooperatives now, or promoting the creation of cooperatives. So I think that's something that you know, considering the barriers to access finance in terms of aggregation and how to channel the funds at the local level, I think cooperatives are the key actor here. And definitely we need more support, building capacities, of course, supporting their governance and their own systems, admin systems, and accountability systems, so they can really be that kind of actor that can channel funds to the smallholder.
Now, I can imagine that. So there is a bit of local financial infrastructure, right? And now then you come in with the impact bonds. And because the local financial infrastructure is not suitable for the kinds of projects that that you're currently financing, or that are. Hey, we have Kamasa back. Hi, Kamasa.
Hi.
Welcome back. I would like
thank you.
All yours.
Okay, my network is very, very bad.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, like I was saying, basically, my organization is into food. We are into food security research, and advocacy. So what we do is that we educate real women on agricultural resource management. Coming from the northern part of Ghana, where the rainfall pattern is just 1 year. Farming has become difficult for my people. Even getting to feed themselves is an issue. So most of them migrate to the southern part of Ghana in search of fertile lands and then rainfall. So to prevent them from degrading the lands down south, so I took it upon myself to investigate areas that have northerners who migrate to settle there. So I have a group of about 7 to 8 people. We visit them, we take them to agricultural resource management, how to conserve moisture and then replenish the soil so they don't end up depleting the land down here like what has happened in the north. So this is what we've been doing from 2016 up to now, and it's yielding results. So in conclusion, we are into food security research and advocacy, and then we provide technical and social support to the real women in the agricultural value chain. That is leveraging traditional knowledge for food security, focusing on women because they are basically the breadwinners in the traditional family.
Fantastic. So I did read your website, And perhaps you can share the website, in the chat box, so everybody else can take a look at your website as well and the great work that you do. And one of the comments that you made during the e-dialogue was, and this actually relates to a question that was just posed from Rael in Kenya, is that the money always seems to go to what you call the famous organizations, right? The international donor money that goes to the usual suspects, if you like. Can you share your experience with that a little bit? Because there seems to be a barrier there that we perhaps are not very much aware
Okay.
of.
Funding has been very difficult because people don't seem to appreciate the fact that a young lady, being a graduate, will waste all your time going around villages, advocating for food security, and then conservation issues. So the small funding that is generated among my team generates funds, and then we have some parcels of lands that we cultivate on, and that is what we use to sustain our activities. So we go to funding agencies, and then nobody seems to be interested in landscape related issues, with the explanation that it's kind of a philanthropy, and they can't actually get back much from it if they invest. Even if you are to acquire loans, the banks are not willing to give out the loans because it's not 100% business that they can add a lot of interest to it. So that is the problem we have now. I think people don't appreciate smaller organizations. Everyone is focused on bigger organizations that have already made names, but we tend to forget the fact that it is a value chain. The smaller ones bring out the issues, and the biggest ones take it out. But the smaller ones, we are directly connected to the indigenous people, and we know the reality underground. So if you are leaving us behind, and then making policies, and I think you turn up to be the victim of such policies, because any building that doesn't have a good foundation would definitely not stand the test of time. We can't be fighting something without tackling the root of it. That is it. We don't treat symptoms of a disease. We try to prevent the vector that spread the disease. So this is what I have to say for now. It is a very sad situation, and we are hoping that God will touch the hearts of government agencies and the bigger organizations to open up to us, so that we'll fight the issues of land degradation, and then acquire food security for the entire world. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So if I can summarize this, you are a grassroots organization well and connected, working on the ground, doing great work, but you are basically not on the radar screen of some of the funders out there, from some of the big funders out there. And probably there are many, many other organizations such as yours, local organizations that are doing great work, but are not seen by international donors, or perhaps even on the national level donors, etc., who should be funding some of your work. And that is, I would say, a major, it's a barrier, but it's also a missed opportunity. And I'm just wondering if you would want to make a recommendation to, we have some people listening here at the Digital Summit. There's people from governments, there's people from international organizations, there's people who have influence. What would you like to tell them?
Okay, what I would like to say is that we are humans. So everything we do on this earth is about humans. So we should focus on humanity. We should focus on humanity,
Yeah.
rather than acquiring wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are a funding agency, and then, okay, if you are a funding agency, and then all you do is about focusing on investing and then getting back something, or only supporting organizations that have made name. Then you are not helping humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You are thinking about yourself.
So,
Because as my group of about 5 graduates, and then five graduates who have also recruited other people, making 78.
mm-hmm.
And then we are in to help humanity. How many people, if we have 5 graduates from every country coming out to do what we are doing. The battle for restoration will be won within a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. So one possibility, and so there's the Global Landscape Forum, right? Could, for example, the Global Landscape Forum create almost like a marketplace where organizations such as yours that are otherwise under the radar of the big donors come and present themselves, and perhaps in this way connect with international donors to make sure that, because they may very well would love to finance you, but they don't know where you are. Perhaps they can't find you. That is, so we need to perhaps create a bit of a marketplace where you can meet with international donors. Would that something that could help? I'm not sure if you heard my question. Aldo, I'd like to, Kamasa, thank you very much. I'm not sure if you hear me, but Aldo, I would like to go back to you. So, is this something you recognize that you are working with local organizations in Peru, and how do we prevent that? The money always goes to the usual suspects, the well-connected, the famous organizations. Do you have any ideas around this?
Yeah, I completely understand, Kamasa. I think it's the reality of many local NGOs, small organizations in tropical countries, and I think I like the way you put it. I think it's a loss. We're losing opportunities because these small organizations, they really have the knowledge, they have the contacts, they know the people, they have the connections on the ground, and many of them have the solutions. They have tested the models, pilots at small scale, and they because they don't have enough funding, they can scale them up. So I think we're missing opportunities there. Part of the logic of the impact bonds is also that they work and rely of a consortium of small organizations. So the logic behind is that to solve a social or an environmental problem, you basically need a group of people, a group of organizations to do it, to address it. So it encourages a partnership between local NGOs and international NGOs, like in our case, to address a problem. And that's this is our case. We are working with indigenous organizations in the ground to solve the problems of smallholders. So we are for the pilot, but also for this scale up we're working on now. We have a partnership between two indigenous organizations to work in the ground. So yeah, certainly, I think some kind of platform to put small organizations to make them visible and try to connect them with funders would be really good. I mean, as something that the Global Landscape can do. That would be really good idea.
Right. So, Kamasa, you've typed something, but I also read here that Bernice from Kenya is at least listening to us, and perhaps Bernice, you can type something in the chat function here. Unfortunately, we don't see you or we cannot hear you, unless you're going to surprise us now and pop up on the screen. I'm afraid that is not the case. In the meantime, Kamasa, can you still hear us? No, Kamasa is also gone. Okay, we will keep improvising. That is how it is. And in the meantime, I had another question. So from Nigeria, and it's from somebody, Adebola from Abuja in Nigeria, who asked how smallholder farmers in northern Nigeria can be assisted in removing these barriers. So what you are working on, although in the Peruvian Amazon, is this something that can be applied everywhere? Can we do this in northern Nigeria with smallholder farmers, for example? Is it a scalable approach, what you have?
Well,
Stop the presses. I believe that we have Bernice from Kenya.
Great.
Bernice, can you hear us? Hi, Bernice. Can you say something? So please feel free to, we can see you, Bernice. No, I'm afraid that perhaps Bernice is, no, I'm afraid. Okay, are you still with us, Aldo?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to the question on Nigeria. And if Bernice, no, there she's gone now. If Bernice comes back, then we will give her the floor. But can we do this in northern Nigeria? Is it scalable?
Yes, I mean, certainly the impact bond model has.
Oh my God.
Okay.
The connection was lost. I mean, mine may appear, but both of them are
right. Bernice, can you hear us? Hi, Bernice. I think we can hear you. All right. Well, I think we just go back to you, Aldo. I'm very sorry for all the listeners that we do not have Bernice and Kamasa with very strong connections. Kamasa we did hear, but not anymore. But Bernice, if you hear this, if you feel free, if the mic is on, always feel free to introduce yourself. Aldo.
Okay, yeah, in the meantime, yes, I mean, this model has been implemented in other countries, in Kenya and Tanzania, for example. There's a impact bond being implemented by Village Enterprise and funded by DFID and USAID. It's around poverty alleviation. There are other impact bonds, not necessarily around poverty or agriculture, but more about education that have been implemented in other parts of the world, like in India. Actually, the first development impact bond was implemented in India on education. So, I mean, I think the model is interesting. It has been tested. I think it could work, and I think, you know, we need this kind of innovations, really, and we need funders, you know, willing to test and willing to experiment and try to really put some funds, some capital, really. That's otherwise we are. It will be quite difficult to try to continue with things as they are now. I know there are, you know, many models there and different kind of initiatives. So I think it would be really interesting to see more. I think the review you have done on the white paper is quite interesting. Definitely, blended finance is something has to be explored more and used more in this kind of context. I see really blended finance as the way to catalyze more finance to smallholders, even more than the others that also you mentioned, than or crowdfunding.
Right. Yeah. So blended. Can you explain a bit, you know, for those people who are less familiar with the term blended finance? Can you just briefly explain what blended finance means and how it can be implemented in a local context in landscapes?
Yes, well, it's basically the use of different kind of finance, public, private finance, philanthropic finance, to make to catalyze and bring more investment from the private sector. For private investors, it's very risky to invest in this kind of landscapes we're talking about. So the role of philanthropic capital, for example, there as first lost trenches, for example, is key to promote investment from the private sector. Or public funding also, they play a key role catalyzing more funds from the private sector. We all know that with philanthropy